Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives. Now before I get to talking about today's episodes, I suppose I should give an update for anyone who hasn't seen my update video or doesn't watch my Spider-Verse retrospective. So, if you hadn't noticed, last week I didn't do any vlogging, and, well, that was mostly because last week we sadly had to put my dog Xander down. It was not something I really wanted to do, but sadly I had no choice in the matter, because he was just not doing well, and he was just suffering, so it kind of had to be done. And as a result, I didn't feel like I'd be in a right mindset to do any vlogging, and I was right. I really did not want to talk. I needed time to process everything, just kind of get my mind off things, just kind of, and I think at this, and well, I don't think I'm 100% better as of the time I'm doing this video. I feel like I'm at least in a better place than I was last week, so that I can still safely do these vlogs without you having to see me just constantly trying to keep it together, so to speak. So I feel that you deserve to know that. But anyway, enough. But anyway, we're not here to talk about my what's going on in my life. We're here to talk about Steven Universe, and today we're going to be discussing episodes 125 and 126 of Steven Universe / the final episodes of season 4. Are You My Dad? And I Am My Mom. And these episodes actually they wrap up the kind of sort of ongoing story that we saw in the previous two episodes. So, how this episode starts out is that Steven is waiting for Jamie to come by and deliver a package because he ordered khakis from from a company called The Distinguished Boy, but for whatever reason, Jamie's running late, so Steven's hasn't been getting his package. As such, kind of getting frustrated and wondering where the hell Jamie is, Steven decides to kind of try and get his mind off things to go to the Big Donut. Well, Amethyst urges him on, but still. However, as Steven goes into town to try and get his donuts, he ends up running into Sour Cream, who it turns out is putting up posters for Onion. It turns out that for whatever reason, Onion has been missing for the last couple of days, and nobody knows where he is. Sour Cream has even checked all of his regular hideouts and spots where he would normally be, and he's not there. So he's starting to get concerned. On top of that, Sour Cream mentions how he wanted to drop off more of these posters at the Big Donut, but for whatever reason, it's closed, which shocks Steven, and when he goes to Big Donut, it's closed up tight. No one's been in there. And so, at first, Steven thinks that maybe Sadie and Lars may be in the back room just doing their own thing, just shirking work and responsibilities. But when Steven tries sneaking in the back, he runs into Sadie's mom, Barb, who it turns out managed to get into the building because she made a copy of the Big Donut's key, because apparently she makes copies of all of Sadie's keys. Anyway, but yeah, Barb confirms that Sadie and Lars are not there. She popped in, but the place is just mysteriously absent, and apparently Barb has not seen Sadie since the party that had happened the night prior, or or specifically when Sadie went off to go to the party that was going on that last night, the night prior. And Steven is a little confused by this because, well, after Steven and Sadie parted ways, she said she was going home. So why hasn't Barb seen her? On top of that, when Steven starts recounting all the people that seem to be mysteriously absent, including Jamie, Barb mentions that she did see Jamie earlier that day. He was in fact going to go and drop off Steven's package, but for whatever reason, he never made it. As such, Steven begins realizing that for whatever reason, people are disappearing around Beach City, and he needs to investigate. As such, Steven and Barb end up splitting up to go to search the boardwalk for any sign of people, but sadly, their searches come up with no results. And so with Steven even going to the arcade, and there's no sign of Onion there. However, as Steven leaves the arcade with a bag of chips, he ends up running into someone that he didn't expect to find. A gem. Specifically, a little short gem wearing what looks like a school uniform, and whose gem is like a little teardrop gem under her eye. She even has a little bow, and the instant Steven sees her, he just immediately freaks out, but she just calmly asks, "Are you my dad?" When Steven's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And basically when he answers that, this gem just starts looking annoyed before sprouting water wings and flying away. Steven, of course, not wanting to be left with another enigma, his own words, he tries chasing after her, but sadly he loses the gem. As such, he ends up going back to the temple and tells the Gems and Connie about what he saw, and sure enough, while they are able to get a rough sketch idea of what the gem looks like, ultimately they realize that for whatever reason this gem is here, they need to find her because, for one thing, if she's a gem, she's probably from Homeworld and means to do them harm. Though, since Steven states that she was apparently looking for her dad, then maybe she doesn't really mean any harm. After all, people have been disappearing all over Beach City, so maybe her dad was one of them. Of course, the gems almost want to write this off because, well, gems don't have parents. They pop out of the ground. The only exception is Steven, and it's only because he's a special case. So, the idea of a gem having a father is kind of ludicrous to them, though Connie does kind of convince them maybe to have an open mind, that maybe she is like Steven. As such, the gems decide that for whatever reason that this gem is on Earth, they need to find her. So they all split up into teams, Garnet going by herself, Amethyst going with Pearl, and Connie going with Steven. As such, they all split up and go around Beach City, and while Connie does have her own wild theories about how this gem could possibly have a parent, especially since Steven did mention that it did look like a regular gem, so its odds are it's not half human like him. Their search eventually leads them to the forest where Onion and his friends used to hang out. And while Steven is searching inside a log for Jamie, because he says, are you delivering some moss or something, Connie does end up encountering the little gem, who starts asking Connie who starts asking Connie the same question that she asked Steven, are you my dad? As such, Connie thinks, no, I'm not your dad. Your dad, but the gem's like, no, I'm not looking for your dad, I'm looking for my dad. As such, Connie is just a little bit confused by this, but when Steven sees that Connie's found the little gem, he says, Connie, be careful, it might be dangerous, but then the instant the gem hears Connie's name, her tune changes, like, oh, Connie, are you Connie? At which point, when Connie does confirm it, the little gem flies around and then calls over someone called Topaz, saying that she found a Connie. As such, Steven and Connie start hearing some loud thumping coming through the forest, which of course gets them on the alert. So Connie unsheathes her sword and gets into battle stance. And sure enough, from the forest, she finds this gem's partner. A large, burly yellow gem, which, as I said, is named Topaz. Her gems are two topaz gems on the side of her head, which essentially act as ears, and dotting all across her body are the missing people. All of them. And sure enough, we see how Topaz was able to get all these people trapped in her body, because immediately her form glows and she unfuses into two smaller topazes, each one with the topaz gem on a different side of their head. And basically, yeah, remember how I mentioned those shadows that were running around at the end of the previous two episodes? Or remember how Onion claimed he was being chased in the dugout episode? Yeah, these were the gems. These were the ones doing the chasing. They were going after Onion, and basically what they've been doing is that every time they found certain people, both topazes have essentially run up to them, and whenever they've gotten close to them, they've fused around them, and of course, because gems' bodies are essentially hard light holograms, whenever they fuse back together, essentially whatever is inside is now stuck in their new body. And, well, that's what they've been doing to all these people, as whenever they see them, they run up to them and just trap them and then just fuse around them. And so both of the topazes do that to Connie, racing up to her and trapping her in their body before she even has a chance to unsheath her sword. As such, Steven sees this and immediately breaks out of the log he's stuck in and just immediately summons a shield with yelling at Topaz to let them go. But the little gem that ordered Topaz just kind of scoffs at him. Kind of scoffs at Steven before she pulls the bow out of her hair, straightens it out, and reveals that it's actually a little mini stasis field generator, which she immediately shoots at Steven, freezing him in place before she just swings him around and throws him into the woods. And as Steven gets this manages to knock Steven out, but before he gets knocked out, he hears the little gem identify herself, claiming that she doesn't understand why the Diamonds even sent an aquamarine like her to do a job like this. It's so easy. And ultimately, the episode ends with Steven falling unconscious as Aquamarine and Topaz make their getaway with the captured people. Which brings us to I Am My Mom, as at that point, this episode cuts ahead to later in time as Steven lets the gems know what the heck's going on, and sure enough, the instant that Garnet and Pearl learn that the little gem was an aquamarine and that she's been going around capturing people with a topaz, they freak out as they realize apparently an aquamarine and topaz combo is a very dangerous combo, and pretty much once they learn that they've been capturing people, they start realizing that they're most likely going to bring them to the human zoo for collection, so to speak. And sadly, because the gems have lost their ship, thanks to the thanks to the machinations of Navy, basically they can't go if the humans are captured, the gems can't pursue. So basically, they have to save the humans now, or they're never going to see them again. Although the question is raised, why are Aquamarine and Topaz only stealing Steven's friends? Because after all, the world is full of different varieties of humans. Why are they specifically targeting Steven's friends? Because everyone they've captured are people Steven knows. Connie, Lars, Jamie, Connie, Onion. Basically, all of them are people that all of them are people that Steven is close to. So why them? Steven argues maybe it's because my friends are the best. But what I love is that there's just a dead silence. But yeah, ultimately they kind of have to table that because they still have to figure out where everybody is. Thankfully, though, Connie somehow manages to snap a picture of where they are and send the picture to Steven's phone. And sends the picture to Steven, manages to text the picture to Steven. As such, Steven figures out that that Aquamarine and Topaz are at Funland, and so they manage to go there, and they begin essentially trying to sneak around and figure out where they are. And Steven, to try and make things easier, ends up calling Connie's phone, which he hears her phone ringing, manages to track it down, but only manages to find it on the ground of the wharf. And sure enough, when Steven finds it, he turns around, and yeah, behind that little tilt-a-whirl saucer thing that Steven, Connie, and Doug got trapped in, there's Topaz and Aquamarine, who it turns out were expecting the group. It's very heavily implied that Aquamarine and Topaz intentionally let Connie send the picture, if not having sent it themselves. Basically, they wanted Steven and the Crystal Gems to arrive, or more specifically, they wanted Steven, because the thing is, the reason why they've been capturing all these specific people, they have a list. So remember back during the whole Human Zoo arc when Steven and Greg were sneaking around while Blue and Yellow were talking, and then when Sapphire came in and said, "Oh, the Earth hadn't been blown up yet," and so Yellow said that they may have a chance at preserving any life that's on there. This is that excuse. Basically, knowing that the Earth is going to be blown up soon. Again, they don't know that the cluster is currently bubbled beneath the Earth, in the center of the Earth. They pretty much just sent Aquamarine and Topaz to Earth to gather a variety of humans in order to place them in the zoo for preservation purposes. Basically, in order to grab humans, the humans that they've been tasked with getting are based on a list that was provided to them, and the people on that list are my dad, Lars, Sadie, Onion, the mailman, and who was the last one? Oh, Connie. Which even Steven's kind of confused why, or even the group's confused how the heck they have that list. To which Aquamarine reveals something. The list was actually created from a report submitted to them by Peridot. So yeah, remember when Steven first confronted Peridot when she was trying to check in on the cluster on Earth, when at first she tried teleporting and then she sent proxy drones? Remember back when Steven actually decided to go up to Peridot and say, "Hi, I'm Steven, nice to meet you," and Peridot's like, "Who the hell are you?" And Steven then offhandedly mentioned all the different humans on Earth? Yeah, the list came from that. Basically, every single person that Steven listed was, well, turned into a list. And considering that in Gem Society, basically names for people are just different subsets of gems, pretty much the gem hierarchy believes it's the same way with humans. So they've been capturing humans based on their names because they all think they're different varieties of humans. And so, as a result, that's why they've been targeting Steven's friends, because they're all from the list that Steven unintentionally provided. And the instant Steven realizes this, he's just horrified and realizes, "Oh my god, this is my fault." However, the gems immediately say that's not important right now, that their goal is still the same. They need to save the people. As such, they try to engage in combat with Aquamarine and Topaz, but sadly that's easier said than done, because one, they can't hit too hard because Topaz is still armed with hostages and they can't hurt them, and anyone that could potentially do any harm, well, they're sadly outclassed. Pearl can't get in close to use her spear because of Aquamarine's stasis field bow. And likewise, when Amethyst tries tripping up Topaz, sadly Topaz is too strong and just flings her around. As such, the gems can't really put up much of a fight, and especially since Aquamarine, to try and to keep things moving, essentially gives them an ultimatum. Essentially, give us what we want, or we're going to start killing hostages, because their orders were to bring Because their orders were, yes, to bring the diamonds, these specific humans, but the orders never said they had to be brought in alive. As such, going back to how the Aquamarine might have intentionally let Steven and co come here, it's because, well, Steven seems to be familiar with everyone on the list, so maybe he knows where my dad is. Because, yeah, the my dad they're looking for isn't actually isn't actually Aquamarine's dad. She's actually looking for a human called my dad, based on the list. As such, Steven, to try and placate Aquamarine and to try and make sure that nobody gets killed or hurt, tells Aquamarine that he's my dad, that they can take him. And what I kind of find amusing is that Aquamarine knows that Steven is bullshitting her. Because even she's like, that's weird. How can a human that's called Steven also be called my dad? Which, I don't know. I love that but basically she goes along with it anyway because she just wants to get this mission over with. So she just accepts it. I don't know. I find that amusing. I love that they just pretty much just bullshit their way through that. As such, Topaz unfuses and while the gems try and urge Steven to not do this, he says he gives him a thumbs up and lets him know that it's fine before he gets captured in the Topaz fusion as well. As such, Steven's intent is to try and pop Topaz by summoning his bubble, but sadly, again, that's easier said than done because Topaz is too thick. Don't interpret that the way I know you're interpreting that. It's that her body is too bulky. Her body is too bulky, so it's hard for Steven to summon the shield. So unfortunately, that plan kind of goes belly up. As Aquamarine, thinking that now they've got all their human quota, ends up summoning the ship, and so she and Topaz board it. And after Aquamarine pretty much gives the crystal gems the rough equivalent of "screw you," she flies on board, and once both gems are there, she immediately starts saying the coordinates for homeworld. And of course, everybody in Topaz panicking because, oh shit, we're gonna be captured. We don't want to leave Earth. Yada yada yada. Basically, they're all just afraid. However, Steven himself keeps trying and struggling to summon the bubble, but thankfully, with enough potion motivation, he finally manages to do so as we hear the sound of his bubble being summoned, and we see Topaz starting to sweat a bit before, boom, Steven manages to disrupt her fusion and cause both of the little Topazes that made her up to fall apart and for all the people to fall to the floor. As such, Aquamarine sees this and just orders both Topazes to get on it and recapture all the humans while she inputs the coordinates for homeworld. And so, basically, Steven and Connie go on the offensive as they try and fend them off, with the Topazes summoning their individual weapons, which are both clubs. That's kind of awesome. But basically, yes, while Steven and Connie are doing their best to fend off the Topazes, sadly, they still have to keep track of all the people. And unfortunately, that's, again, easier said than done, as one Topaz manages to grab Sadie, and while Sadie pleads for Lars to help her, Lars sadly is getting shell-shocked throughout all this. Well, maybe not shell-shocked. He's just plain scared, and while it looks like he wants to try and put up a brave front, he instead runs away and hides down a flight of stairs. As such, as everything's just going to hell in a handbasket, Steven and Connie do manage to save Sadie from the Topaz that captured her, and they eventually Sadie manages to get out of its grip by biting the Topaz's finger, which I think is funny. But basically, they realize they gotta get out of here. So Steven manages to open the door. So as they try and get to the door, of course the Topaz are putting up a fight, but immediately before the ship can take off, their flight is disrupted. And when they open the door, they soon see how it's being disrupted. It's Alexandrite, as the crystal gems have fused into her and are now holding the ship in place. As such, Steven manages to convince everyone to jump into the water. Steven tells Alexandrite to move the ship closer to the water so everyone can jump off. And at first, it does almost seem to work, but as everyone's going down, they all get frozen in place. As Aquamarine has decided, okay, I finally need to do something, as she got out of her seat and has hit everyone with her stasis field. But simply, yeah. She's not just gonna back down easily. She was given a job by the Diamonds, and she intends to carry it out. So, regardless of what Steven wants, he and his friends are not getting away. As such, Steven quickly realizes they're kind of fucked. At this point, he cannot face Aquamarine and Topaz by himself, and they could very easily overpower him. So he realizes he's pretty much up shit's creek without a paddle. So he decides to do the one thing he can do in the situation. He reveals to Aquamarine that he isn't really my dad like he said he was, which does annoy Aquamarine something fierce, but Steven does explain that he's actually someone that the Diamonds want more than any of these humans. He is not. He is the one. He is someone greater. He is the one that shattered Pink Diamond. He is the leader of the Crystal Gems. He is not his dad. He is his mom. He is Rose Quartz, which with him immediately showing off his gem. And the instant Aquamarine hears that, she immediately lets everyone go from the stasis field, which in turn causes Alexandrite to unfuse back into Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. As Steven pretty much tells them, leave them alone, let them be, and I'll come with you willingly to Homeworld. And Aquamarine accepts these terms. She's more than happy to deliver the Diamond's greatest enemy on a silver platter. As such, while everyone everyone down below is just pleading with Steven, don't do this, come on with us, don't you dare go in there. Steven just tells them it's for the best, he has no choice, and so basically he just walks into there, and as everyone's saying, no, please, no, don't do this, the last words Steven says are, I love you, before the ship closes up, and then warps away, with the last thing we hear in the episode being Connie yelling Steven's name. So, yeah, that's how Season 4 ends. So, my thoughts on these episodes. Now, like with other episodes that are two-parters, I'm going to treat these both as if they're one episode. And quite frankly, I love these episodes. I love the underlying tension that's built up in the "Are You My Dad" episode, because again, what we saw in the previous two episodes, something was clearly going on behind the scenes. We kept seeing when we saw Onion being when Onion was confronted in Funland and was just freaking out the way he was, and seemingly was freaking out the way he was, it was implied that he was running from something. And while Steven and Co believe that it was just them that he was running from, thinking that they were something worse, we soon basically the end of the episode the end of the episode revealed that there was indeed something there that was after Onion, because once Steven and Co had left, they immediately popped out, and all we saw of them were their shadows, one small, one big. And to see those shadows come back at the end of the Good Lars when Sadie was on her way home and we saw the shadows following after her, it's clear that there was something clearly going on behind the scenes. And so when we get to Are You My Dad, we start learning that people have been disappearing. It starts giving you the chills, because because the idea of having people, just start mysteriously vanishing without a trace, and no one knows where they are, and there hasn't been a single clue to where they could be, it definitely makes you wonder what the hell is going on, and that underlying tension just makes you wonder who could be next, what's going to happen next, who's going to disappear, and so on and so forth. And so to see the gems start looking through, and so when the instant Steven starts investigating it, it does make you wonder, is something bad happening? And then you have Aquamarine enter the fray. Now, odds are you could make the connection that she's partially responsible for what's happening to these people, because again, one of the shadows you saw was clearly hers, especially since you could see the wing outlines in her shadow and she has the same water wings. But at the same time, the instant she shows up, immediately something is not right here, especially when she begins asking Steven, "Are you my dad?" Something like at face value, it's like you think the same thing that Steven and Co are thinking. Is she asking where her dad is? But it makes you clearly wonder, how does she fit into all this? Why is she asking where her dad is? And so, as Steven and Co want to start asking questions, you start wondering, is this who I think it is? Is this really the person we saw at the end of those episodes? But then, as things continue going on, you start learning more and more about her, and we start learning that this seemingly innocent lost child is in fact a psychotic monster who clearly revels in the pain of others. Because she happily captures everybody. She just laughs in the face of resistance, and anytime anyone tries to stop her, she just brushes it off. And you can kind of see why the gems were worried when they heard that an Aquamarine was involved, because Aquamarine is sadistic, put simply. And while Aquamarine herself doesn't have the power that you would expect a gem to have, you can tell that she's smart. She utilizes Topaz brilliantly, because Topaz is just clearly the muscle meant to carry out her orders. But then likewise, she's able to utilize her own enemy's weaknesses again and use them to her advantage. We see that when the crystal gems confront her and Topaz when she realizes the gems aren't going to go anywhere until they save these people. And so she's like, okay, so you care about these people? Great. So tell us what we want to know, or we're gonna start killing them. So it's just, like, you can tell that there is a sick, twisted mind in there. Which makes me believe that Aquamarines are meant to be like strategists. They can plot the best course of action, and regardless of their small, and basically the small size is most likely meant to be very deceptive. Because I look at Aquamarine, and she doesn't look like she'd be a problem. Without her bow or topaz guarding her, you feel like you could just punch her right across a football field. But with those added elements, she is very much a force to be reckoned with, and she knows and odds are, even if she was by herself, she could strategize, because she's not powerless without those resources. She can fly on her own, she's still smart and intelligent, and odds are, if left to her own devices, she could easily plot out like a trap in order to get what she wants. And we see that kind of showcased in the episode, because when Steven does eventually manage to free the humans from Topaz's grasp, she just kind of sits on the sidelines and let Topaz deal with it while she just does her own thing. But the instant that it looks like that her plan might fail, that's when she jumps into action and just grabs everyone in the stasis field. And basically, that's the be-all, end-all. The stasis field, you can't fight it. The instant you're grabbed in it, you can't move, you can't resist, you can't fight. And basically, the instant that Aquamarine plays that card, she's like, oh, look at that, I guess I won. Like, it's clear that so you can kind of understand why the gems would most likely be worried to have Aquamarine there, because even if she doesn't have that extra muscle, she's still intelligent and has access to her own natural resources that make her someone that you don't want to screw with. And just that with the added bonus of Topaz, it's an even bigger threat, because Topaz is definitely scary. It's basically one of those unknown enemy type of tropes, because the entire time throughout both these episodes, Topaz doesn't speak. Either when she's fused or unfused. She is basically the silent Hulk. She doesn't say a single word. She remains stone-faced throughout the entire story. The only time we see her flinch is when she starts sweating, when Steven starts creating his bubble in her. And even then, that's most likely because she can feel something building up inside her. Think of it like a gas bubble that will literally blow up your stomach. And so, in that regard, that's the only time she flinches, but even then, when she split back up into the two other individual Topazes, both of them are still just a stone phase and are immediately just ready for battle, as both of them immediately start zeroing in on the hostages, and even both start summoning their clubs and actually put up a decent fight. It actually is, I like that. It showcases basically what both of them are meant to do, and that they're both definitely people you don't want, that they're both definitely not something you can just take, they're not very easy opponents. While in terms of strength, they probably aren't the best, at the same time, with their own natural powers, make them someone you don't really want to mess with. Definitely you can see why the gems were worried when they heard about them. On top of that, when you do eventually learn what Aquamarine and Topaz's plans are, that they're the ones responsible for stealing all the humans, immediately an underlying tension of mystery about where they went immediately turns into the underlying mystery turns into tension, because at this point, they know they're on the clock, because for whatever reason, they are hunting people to take back to the zoo, but that also means that if that's what their goal is, then they need to they need to save these people ASAP, because without access to the Ruby's roaming eye, the gems are stuck on Earth. So if these people are taken off Earth, that's it. Game over. Bad guys win. So they need to try and work as fast as possible. But because the bad guys do have these innocent victims on standby, the gems need to be careful. They can't just take them on in a fair fight. Going back to when Aquamarine tried use these people as a bargaining chip, Garnet did almost go in to try and fight Topaz, but all Topaz had to do was just show off Jamie's face, and Garnet had to pull back. So it's clear that essentially the gems are at a stalemate themselves. They can't directly fight them without hurting the hostages, and then likewise, when Aquamarine starts using the hostages to try and get what she wants out of them, it's clear that the gems are very much at a disadvantage throughout the episode. And it isn't until Steven manages to pop Topaz that they even start getting a footing. And that footing is lost very quickly when Aquamarine decides to enter the fray again. So I like that little bit of mounted tension. I like how that quickly goes. We got the underlying mystery and tension throughout the first part, as the gems, as mysteries are added on top of each other, with people vanishing, with the addition of Aquamarine and where she fits, and then maybe a little bit of hope that she could be a kindred spirit for Steven until we learn Do we learn that she is indeed from Homeworld, and that she and Topaz are kidnapping people? And likewise, there's the tension in the second part as the gems try and track the pair down so they can free the people before they get off planet. I like that. I like how that goes. And unlike other battles the gems have fought, this one ends with them losing. This one ends with them losing, because the only way they achieve even a slight bit of victory is by Steven sacrificing himself and handing himself over to Aquamarine. Because, again, as we've seen throughout in previous episodes, the instant any gems learn that Steven is Rose's son, they immediately turn their attention to him because, well, since they don't understand the human reproductive cycle, the instant they see Rose's gem, they're like, oh, he's Rose, we need to get him. And so Steven uses that to his advantage as by making that his bargaining chip, telling Aquamarine and Topaz, let them go and you can have me. So, and yeah, immediately, yeah, but the final shot of the episode being Steven being sent to Earth, being brought to Homeworld, yeah, it's clear that that there's going to be some things that need to be answered for because, well, because after all, the same rules still apply for Steven. The gems don't have access to space travel. They can't go in after Steven if he's brought to space. And again, Steven is going, and before, when Steven went to the human zoo, that was just like a portion of what Homeworld was. Now he's going straight to Homeworld, straight to the people who want him dead because of what his mom did. So there is still very much, so basically, it's clear that Steven doing this is very much bad for him, but he felt that he had no choice. Which, going back to character stuff, you can see Steven still trying to carry the weight of the world in these 2 episodes. When Steven realizes that people are vanishing, he's like, I have to do something. It's my responsibility. Something's happened to them. I have to fix it. And then when Steven learns that the reason why his friends were being targeted specifically was because of a list he unintentionally provided, he just starts hitting himself even harder. Like, he just starts laying down the guilt something fierce. When he frees Connie, when he and Connie are fighting Topaz together, he's just apologizing to high heaven saying, I'm sorry, it's my fault. The list of people they got came from me. This is all my fault. And it's partially because of that feeling of guilt that Steven even is willing to let himself go forward, because in a way, it's like he's trying to pay recompense for what he's done. In his mind, he's the one responsible for everything, and he genuinely believes that he has no choice but to do this, that this is the only path he can take. And it's tragic, it's sad, and combining all that together with him being brought to Homeworld directly to the diamonds, it definitely lays attention, and once again makes you wonder what the hell is going to happen. How is he going to escape from this? How is he going to overcome this? How is he going to get back to Earth? He's being brought to he's being taken off planet. He's being brought to Homeworld with no means of potentially getting home. It definitely keeps the tension going and makes you wonder where things are going to happen here. And with this being the season finale, it definitely is a good way to keep the audience's attention and make them want to know what's happening next. So again, I dig it. I like it. It's nice. It's nice. A good way of keeping everyone engaged. Overall, these 2 episodes, I think, are really good. I like the underlying mystery in the first episode as Steven tries putting the pieces together and figuring out what's going on before he learns how everything plays together, and the amount and the tension that comes in the second part as the gems have to work and essentially beat the clock to save Steven's friends while also trying to stop Aquamarine and so forth, is definitely a good way of keeping everything going. And the way it all ends with Aquamarine and Topaz almost getting a victory until Steven sacrifices himself to save his friends, it definitely is like an oh shit moment with the last shot of the episode, definitely making you wonder what the hell is going to happen next and where the next season will go. So again, I dig it. It's really good and I can't help but enjoy it. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I apologize for the sunlight that just gradually appeared here and moved over there. Again, it's the downside of recording this in the morning. You think I'd learn, but I don't. But I hope you still enjoyed the video regardless, and hopefully next week you will tune back in as we look at the first 2 episodes of Season 5 and see exactly what happens when Steven goes to Homeworld and has to pay the bill for his mother's crimes. So until then, I hope you have a good Friday. I hope that, again, this was okay for you. As always, I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope I can see you next week. Take care.